and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am, as always, very happy to be with you to bring you another author interview. As we get started, as I always do, I do want to remind you to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help the algorithm, gets this podcast out to more readers, such as yourselves. If you would like to help the podcast and the network as a whole in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.info. There you can leave a tip or a donation. You can also leave a question or comment with that tip or donation. I'm happy to engage with those questions and comments. I love hearing from listeners, as I always say. So if you want to leave anything that you want me to engage with, I'm happy to do that at the beginning of the next episode. Again, to leave a tip or a donation, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info. You see that link next to me. You'll also see it scrolling underneath in the blue and white box underneath the main screen throughout the show. So you can go to that link. As always, thank you so much for all of the support you've given this podcast, whatever support that form has taken. I am delighted to have you with me. I am also delighted, as always, to bring you another author interview. I am speaking this week with author A. Ashley Hoff. He's a Hollywood historian. We're talking about the movie Mommie Dearest, which is a movie based on the book Mommie Dearest, written by Christina Crawford, who is the daughter of Joan Crawford. So this is a book, as I said at the end of the last episode, a book based on a movie, based on a memoir, and everything that it took to go into the creation of making this movie, and it was a lot. Let me show you the cover of the book. I will read you a description of this book. With Love, Mommie Dearest, the making of an unintentional camp classic. When she died in 1977, Joan Crawford was remembered as an icon of Hollywood's golden age, until publication the following year of her daughter's memoir, Mommie Dearest. Christina Crawford's book was an immediate bestseller, combining the infrequently discussed topic of child abuse with the draw of Hollywood drama. But when Paramount Pictures released the film version starring Faye Dunaway as Crawford, it was panned, and it remains one of the most legendary critical bombs in film history. The lavish big-screen adaptation drew unexpected laughter for its over-the-top scenes depicting life in the Crawford household. Rarely have such good intentions been met with such ridicule. Despite this, the movie was a commercial success and remains 4 decades later immensely popular as an unintentional camp classic. Based on new interviews with people connected to the book and the film, from cast and crew members to industry insiders, With Love, Mommie Dearest details the writing and selling of Christina's book and the aftermath of its publication, as well as the filming of the motion picture, whose backstage drama almost surpassed what was viewed on screen in the film. Hollywood historian A. Ashley Hoff explores the phenomenon, the camp, and the very real social issues addressed by the book and the film. Again, that is the description of With Love, Mommie Dearest, the making of an unintentional camp classic. It is when I was first asked to do this interview, I got the email from the publicist, and she said it was, of course, this book based on this movie, and I was 6 when the movie came out. So I did not see the movie, of course, when it came out, but I saw it somewhere, or I don't think I've ever seen the entire film. I definitely didn't see it as a child. But the first thing that came to mind, and maybe the first thing that comes to mind for you, is a scene with Faye Dunaway playing Joan Crawford screaming about wire hangers. No wire hangers. I think maybe anyone who knows anything about this movie knows the no wire hangers scene. We do talk about that in the interview. I remember as a kid, I couldn't figure out why this mom was so angry. I knew it was supposed to be a scary scene. It seemed scary. She seemed very mean. The child seemed scared. But even as a kid, I thought, this is a weird scene. What is going on here? And I was very confused as to why the mom was upset about the wire hangers, because I thought, she's the adult. Isn't she the one that bought the hangers? Where did these hangers come from? I was hung up on where the hangers came from. How did the kid get the wire hangers? Because the kid looked like she was maybe like my age, and she seemed scared. So this is the only thing that I had in my brain when I got the email about the book, was the no wire hanger scene, and me being so confused as a child about about this scene and why. I think that was pretty much my takeaway. Why? Maybe you know, maybe you've seen this movie once. Maybe you've seen this movie a bunch of times. People have very different reactions to the movie, but 4 decades later, as that description said, it's still, people know about the movie, and it is still quite popular in many circles. People resonate with the movie for different reasons. People enjoy the movie for different reasons. It failed critically, but it was a success in a lot of ways. And this book explores the why. And I say, I said in the last interview with an author writing about a movie, and I say it again, and I'll say it right now. Sometimes I don't even know how movies get made. All the stuff that goes on behind the scenes with actors and producers and directors and writers, and it's so much. It's amazing that everything eventually can fall into place, and it's amazing what goes right and what goes wrong and what gets decided. And this book talks about all of those factors, as well as the memoir behind the book and the darker issues addressed in that memoir, because that memoir is about child abuse and Christina's experience growing up in that household with her adopted mother. As we get started, I realized that I just jumped right into the book, which is great. That's what we're here for. But I always ask how your week is going, and I give you a little update on how my week is going. And I'm a little discombobulated today. I'm not going to dwell because I don't want to cry, but you've seen my dogs. I talk about my dogs all the time, and they're actually wandering around. You'll see them in the interview, especially the boy dog, who was very upset that he was out here with me and not in the bedroom with his dad, which is where he wanted to be. So you'll see him back there standing at the doorway looking like, hello, let me in. Monday night, very unexpectedly, we lost the girl dog, Tallulah Cooper. She would have been 11 in December. They're brother and sisters. They both would have been 11 in December. Chalupa will be 11 in December. It was unexpected. We have been kind of expecting him to go first because he's had health issues for a lot of his life, and she's always been the healthy one, but I won't give you all the details. It was hard, and it still is hard, and my week is not great. So I'm not, again, going to talk about it more because keeping it together, but I do not want to make this about me and my dog, but I did want to let you know that I'm not maybe my usual self this week. So thank you for all the kind thoughts that I've gotten, kind words from people who know, and I appreciate those very, very much. And I appreciate Ashley's patience this week with me as I'm getting the episode out. Let's talk about the book. Again, the book is called With Love, Mommie Dearest, The Making of an Unintentional Camp Classic. The author is A. Ashley Hoff, and let's get right into that interview. Hello, Ashley, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, hello.
It is wonderful to have you here. I love, you're my first airport interview. I've had somebody at a baseball game, but never an airport. So thanks for being a first.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I like the eccentricity of being on the go, books on the go. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to know what the life of a best-selling author is like, I'll just simply say it's not always first-class travel. But, that's where improvisation and a sense of humor comes in handy.
Both of those can get you far in life. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about With Love, Mommie Dearest. But before we do that, would you just take a moment or two to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, having grown up in the Midwest, which can be very cold, yet very pretty this time of year. I, put on my immigrant's babushka and came to the promised land of Los Angeles, where I was working in talent agencies, both in Chicago and then in LA, and then switched from working in agencies to writing about show business. Instead of working behind the scenes in show business, I just simply switched gears and I now write about it. I wrote a book in 2019 on the popular 70s TV game show Match Game. It's called Match Game 101, a backstage history of Match Game. And that had basically come about because I knew somebody who worked as celebrity coordinator of the show back in the 70s. You know, it's been shown on reruns, endlessly shown on the Game Show Network and Buzzer for the past, years, X number of years. And I had basically said to her, Kay, you should write a book about your years working on the show. I would buy it. She said she didn't want to write a book, but said, if you want to write about it, I'll gladly talk to you for it. She put me in touch with other people. I already knew certain people, and thus a book was born. My current book is With Love, Mommie Dearest, the making of an unintentional camp classic. And I guess my shtick is in finding all these seemingly vapid or comical pop culture things and finding the depth in them. With Match Game, I was able to, detail the history of the show. It's a fun game show. It's not a hard game show. It's all about personalities. But I talked about the way that game shows of its era kind of helped pave the way, it could be argued, pave the way for things like civil rights, gay rights, the women's movement, because they introduced a lot of hot button topics into middle American living rooms in the form of seemingly harmless, comical, fill in the blank questions and answers.
Right.
And then with Mommie Dearest, a movie that has long been regarded as a joke, a flop, a cinematic bomb, even though it deals with a very real topic of child abuse and bullying and how to overcome that. I've been able to find the depth and kind of present, I think, a sympathetic look at these subjects.
Yeah. And I like that it's a book based on a movie, based on a book. So you got some layers, but it really was. It was Christina Crawford's memoir about growing up in an abusive household. And the movie that most people know is not exactly hard-hitting expose of child abuse in Hollywood. So give an overview of the story. First of all, you said the whole title, With Love, Mommie Dearest, the making of an unintentional camp classic, which is what it turned into. So before we start with the background, just give a quick overview for people who I'm going to assume most people know what camp is, but just in case, let's just talk about what camp is and why we should know about camp for this particular movie.
Right. Well, okay, I'll set up with just the backstory of the film itself. Christina Crawford wrote this memoir, Mommie Dearest, which was released in 1978, the year after the death of her adopted mother, Joan Crawford, who was a screen legend, one of the great movie stars in Hollywood during the golden age period of filmmaking. And the book was, a scandal because Joan Crawford was, had just passed the year before. The book came out in 1978, was a runaway bestseller, and was both controversial because it, accused this great movie legend of being a not always nice behind the scenes person. And it's interesting because it also kind of helped bring distinctions between disciplining your child, and actually, abusing or bullying a child because, Joan Crawford was apparently an alcoholic. There were other elements, career issues that just kind of made for a very tense household.
Yeah.
The movie came out a few years later in 1981, starring Faye Dunaway as screen legend Joan Crawford. The movie was this very lavish, very handsomely appointed movie. They had a budget, they had an A-list star, they had an A-list director, and top-notch set production and costume design. It's a gorgeous film to look at. And somehow the movie just went off the rails. And basically this movie that was supposed to be a serious drama depicting, it's basically a serious Hollywood biopic, turned into an unintentional comedy.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that in itself can be very controversial because there are certain people who like to ask, the movie's about child abuse. And what's so funny about child abuse?
Right.
Well, this is where the soft touch in writing a book like this comes in. I had I had seen the movie, when I was a teenager. It appeared on cable one day and was cut to ribbons with commercial interruptions replacing all the so-called campy scenes. So the movie I saw, actually, even I knew of its campy reputation, but what I saw looked more like a horror film. So
Mm-hmm.
I was always very conscious of the fact that this is at base about child abuse, and this is a pretty harrowing tale. And I sought out, I was like 14. I sought out the book, read that. I was already interested in Hollywood history and old movies and the golden age of Hollywood. So I found this very interesting. Reading Christina's memoir, which is a very sympathetic account of the situation. She doesn't, she has a reputation for trashing her mother. The movie allegedly trashes Joan Crawford far more than I think the book does, but that's, that can be debated amongst the Crawford fans out there. But the book was a serious attempt at writing a memoir about, what life was like in a, gilded, golden age Hollywood lifestyle, and growing up amidst all that, and having the, tenuous mother-daughter relationship that she had with Joan Crawford. The movie, as I said, was not received by audiences as it was intended. People were laughing at, the wrong moments.
Right.
And some of the really harrowing scenes, the infamous wire hangers sequence, for instance, was producing titters and laughters and giggles, and you just have to, it's kind of hard to say why would anybody laugh at a subject like this. You kind of just have to see the movie to understand it.
Yeah.
What I had seen, like I said, looked like a horror film because it was cut to ribbons, and then with commercial interruptions and so on. And then when I finally saw the movie uncut, I thought, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. And I explain in the book why the movie is seen that way. Some of the takes just last, they can have a very dramatic scene, and then the camera just hovers just a split second, a little too long, so that it looks like a soap opera about to segue into a commercial break. And there are just these moments, unintentionally risible dialogue, some of the camera shots, some of the props. There is this wonderful moment that I describe in the book where Faye, as Joan, holding her, new baby that she's newly adopted, Christina, she carries her up this gorgeous Art Deco staircase. And then, it's like she's ascending to the heavens, like some Madonna figure. And then she turns toward the camera, framed against the backdrop of the windows arching behind her, so that it creates a halo effect.
Right.
And it just looks rather intentionally, like a Renaissance painting. But it would have been great had that been an image used in a magazine layout, or perhaps for the movie poster, but it looks just ridiculous in a movie.
Yeah.
Like in moving motion picture, because who does that? And I actually found out why that was done.
Well, Ashley knows, but you're going to have to wait because we are going to take our first break of this episode. Keep this conversation in mind because we'll be picking it up after the break, of course. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with A. Ashley Hoff. We are talking about his book about the movie Mommie Dearest. Before the break, I left you hanging. He was talking about a particular scene in the movie that is lit and staged in a way that didn't make a lot of sense for a movie. Maybe a stage production, it made sense. It was a scene with Joan Crawford and new baby Christina, and the way they framed it was like a Renaissance painting and the lighting. I'm gonna back it up just a little bit to get the couple of sentences before, so we're not just jumping right back into that conversation, and you'll remember what Ashley was talking about. As we get started, I do want to remind you once again that if you want to support the podcast in a monetary way, you can leave a tip or a donation at gsmcpodcast.info. That is incredibly helpful to not only the podcast, but to the network as a whole. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.info. Thank you as always for everything that you do to support this podcast. And now back to that conversation with Ashley about this particular scene in the movie and why it was set up the way that it was set up.
And then she turns toward the camera, framed against the backdrop of the windows arching behind her, so that it creates a halo effect.
Right.
And it just looks rather intentionally, like a Renaissance painting. But it would have been great had that been an image used in a magazine layout or perhaps for the movie poster. But it looks just ridiculous in a movie.
Yeah.
Like in moving motion picture, because who does that? And I actually found out why that was done. Director Frank Perry, who was a great indie film director and later doing some big budget Hollywood movies. He started in theater. He was a theater director, and he saw Mommie Dearest, Christina's book, as something akin to Greek tragedy. He kept directing Faye, in fact, to play Medea. You know, you are Medea, he kept saying. And so as a result, he saw the overall story in this very heightened way. And as a result, he chose certain framing devices in the way he photographed the film that kind of make it look like an over-the-top theater production. And that works very well in theater. It is not always as successful on screen as it would be on stage. So, you know, audiences and critics were, once the movie was released, accusing Faye Dunaway of overacting and turning the movie into a melodrama and chewing the scenery.
Yep.
And she is. She absolutely is. And it actually works perfectly for the movie and for the character. But it's not subtle. And as a result, it produces unintentional laughter sometimes from audience members. The other element, I guess, that went into explaining why I chose this sympathetic method of telling the story. Why did Mommie Dearest turn out the way it did? You know, why did this movie that had everything going for it turn out to have this reputation, and for the past 43 years induce, you know, unintentional laughter when it's about such a serious subject? I've found that there are a lot of people who, yes, watch the movie as unintentional comedy, and they'll watch it over and over again and laugh and find it funny. But a lot of people also find it very therapeutic. A lot of people who themselves experienced a lot of bullying or abuse, whether from their parents or their classmates or even on the job from their coworkers, have found some sort of cathartic, therapeutic release in watching the movie over and over again. It's kind of like they're working through something.
Yeah.
So that's another reason that while I talk about the camp elements of the movie, of course, it's unavoidable. I don't just make fun of the movie. I don't make fun of Christina. I don't make fun of the actors, and I don't make fun of the crew members. Having worked for many years in talent agencies, I've known a lot of professional actors and actresses, as well as crew members, as well as people who worked on the production staffs of these studios and these productions. And the truth is that nobody sets out to make a flop.
Right.
Nobody sets out to make a critical failure. Everybody wants the best for whatever the project they're working on. And in fact, the people who do the sound, the editing, the costumes, the wigs, the set design. You know, this movie was supposed to be an awards-worthy spectacle. People were expecting awards nominations, if not, in fact, Oscar wins from this movie. And when the movie was released and the critics weighed in on its merits or not, that kind of dashed everybody's hopes for, you know, winning any awards. And people have moved on in the ensuing 43 years since the movie was released to work on other projects. But it's still, you know, the legend of Mommie Dearest, this notorious movie, still hangs as kind of an albatross around some people's neck.
Yeah.
Which goes a long way to explaining why Faye Dunaway, for one, does not like discussing the movie.
Right.
As a method-trained actress, as someone who takes herself and her craft very seriously, she put her all into the movie. Everybody who worked on the movie put their all into the movie. And unfortunately, you know, once the reviews came in, it just left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And I was lucky enough to interview a lot of people who worked on the movie, whether some of the actors on screen, both in major as well as minor roles, as well as some of the surviving crew members and some of the production staff members who had a lot to share about why this movie turned out the way it did.
Well, I think that's where you do a really good job, is you show the layers. I mean, when I read the book, and I've read I did another interview several months ago about the making of another movie, and when I read through books like this, my first thought is always, how does any movie ever get made? Because there's so much that goes into it, and there were so many changes in this movie even before, you know, the number of scripts that they went through, the getting of directors and producers and actors, and just the changes that kept constantly having. And then once you get into it, and what you're talking about with the way it was, the way that Faye Dunaway especially was told to act, etc., you really do a good job of layering everything up so you can see how it went from A to B to C to finally what it turned out as. I can only imagine the number of hours of interviews that you did. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, just the interview process and then collating all of that, figuring out how to put it together into a book?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I got this book deal at the tail end of the COVID lockdown. I had pitched it. I had my literary agent, Eric Myers of New York. I pitched him about 6 or 8 different ideas. I didn't even think this was the most marketable of them, but he came back to me and he said, I already know 3 or 4 editors off the top of my head I could pitch this to. And I said, that's the one. So I started research on it. But because we were at the end of lockdown, the Margaret Herrick Library, which is in Beverly Hills and is run by the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, that is where the production files for Mommie Dearest, as well as a lot of movies. They're kept in the archives at the Margaret Herrick. And at that time, the library was closed. I was dealing with research through Relay with one of the librarian assistants who was only in once a week. And so it was difficult to do the kind of quick research I would have done. So it took a little longer, but it kind of worked in my favor because I had to work harder in the long run. Since I couldn't rifle through the production files as easily as I otherwise might have, I basically took to tracking down actors and actresses. I was able to contact some people through the unions, which is one way of doing it, but a lot of people had either retired, had moved on to different job markets. A number of people had passed on, but I was very lucky. I was tracking people down through social media, through the white pages, and cold calling people, as well as when I could, trying to reach them through their managers or through their publicists and agents. And I was very lucky that people actually were willing to talk to me, because I was afraid when I brought up the subject matter, hi, I'm writing a book about Mommie Dearest, I wasn't sure how many people would be open to talking with me. And there were a couple of people who admitted to me that as soon as I said the words Mommie Dearest, they just kind of froze up with trepidation. 4 decades on, it still has that effect on people sometimes.
Which is
there was one
crazy.
There was one former Paramount executive, very high up Paramount executive back in the day, now working in other arenas, who I reached out to and initially said to me that they did not want to talk to me because they did not want to get an angry phone call from Faye Dunaway. And I thought that was amusing on the one hand, that Faye's wrath still carries that much power. But at the same time, I just recognized, this is a movie that a lot of people had a lot of hurt feelings over. But this person did end up talking with me, as long as I didn't use their name or any identifying clues as to who they were.
Right.
And they actually gave me a lot of insight into the movie. So I was very lucky that people were actually willing to talk to me and share their stories and just, basically answer the question, what happened? How did this movie turn out the way it did? And I feel very satisfied that I've at least been able to answer that question, satisfy my curiosity at least.
Yeah. And just the fact that people are still quite triggered by the events of that movie 43 years on, it says a lot about the whole process. Is there any particular stories that stick out that you want to share now, or?
I'm going to give one little tidbit, which actually amuses me to no end. I had interviewed Mara Hobel, who played young Christina in the movie.
Who enjoyed the experience. She was one of the ones that really seems to have good memories of it.
She really did. I mean, she was 9 years old when she made the movie. She said Faye Dunaway was, superb with her, treated her very nicely, very respectfully, let her know, I'm a method-trained actress, so if I seem distant or quiet, I need to focus, I need to concentrate, but this is not personal, it's just, this is part of my process. And she said that when they did scenes such as the hair cutting scene or the wire hangers scene, they went out of her way to say, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And it was all choreographed in such a way. I think in the moment on camera, it, once everybody knew their basic marks to hit, I think they went in 20 different directions, depending on the take. But overall, Mara had a great time making the movie and learned a lot, and went on to have an extensive career. She'd had one beforehand, but she went on to continue having an extensive career, both on stage as well as television, as well as some film since then. But she had told me that during the infamous rare meat sequence, in which young Christina is forced to eat a rare, bloody rare steak, when, the real Christina Crawford really, she's not a vegetarian, but she, let's just say, has liked her meat well done as opposed to rare. But Mara told me the whole time she was doing the film, or doing that scene, that she thought that bloody steak was absolutely appetizing. She actually liked then and still likes her meat rare. And I just thought that was hilarious. Just because
especially for a 9-year-old. Yeah.
Especially for a 9-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah. That was another thing that just the different ranges of people's experiences, some of them had a very balanced view of it. Some of them had a very negative view of the entire process. Some of them had a very positive view. So I can imagine it was an interesting challenge to kind of sift through all of that and make a cohesive picture of the making of this film.
Well, I'm not going to lay the blame on any individual. And
Right.
I will say Faye Dunaway has gotten the brunt of it. She's obviously the most visible element in the movie. People have said she's the sole reason the movie turned out the way it did. She definitely contributed to it, and she contributed more than probably she's willing to admit, but she's not the sole reason.
Right.
And I kind of itemize all the different elements that went into the directorial, editing, as well as performing choices. It's very interesting. We talked about cast changes that had occurred before filming commenced. Anne Bancroft was initially supposed to play Joan Crawford in the movie. This was while they were still hammering out the script and were still in the process of finding the director. So this was early on. And Anne Bancroft actually knew Joan Crawford, and as a serious actress herself, had found the idea of playing Joan Crawford as a character study would be just a very interesting experience for her to do. She was very anxious to play Joan Crawford, but for various reasons that I detail in the book, dropped out. And kind of in the not quite 11th hour, but let's say the 10:30 p.m. hour. And Faye Dunaway decided to toss her ankle strap shoe in the ring. And Faye obviously got the role and has been criticized for it for a long time, but at the same time, you cannot say she gives a bad performance. You cannot say it's a bad movie, because, it's a flawed movie. It's definitely a flawed movie, but it's not a bad movie. You're never bored. And with her performance, we're still talking about it 43 years later.
Yeah.
There were a number of movies that won awards the year 1982, the following year of the release, that won, lofty, critics' choice awards and the Oscars and all this kind of stuff. The Oscar for Best Picture in 1982 went to Chariots of Fire, a movie whom everyone knows the theme song, but I don't think anybody's actually watched the movie in 43 years.
It's running on a beach. I can tell you that, and that's about it.
Yeah, it looks fabulous.
Yeah.
The music's great.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody has really watched the Olympics, of that year, what was it, 1928, whenever it was supposed to be set. I don't think anybody's watched that movie since it was released. But the thing is, Mommie Dearest, I can walk into any retail outlet today that sells DVDs and Blu-rays, and the chances are pretty good they've got that movie in stock. It doesn't even have to be special order. And I think if a movie is that recognizable and that popular this many years on, it's not a bad movie.
Yeah.
Misunderstood, again, flawed, but definitely not a bad movie.
Right.
And I think that's pretty good.
think I've ever actually looked for a copy of Mommie Dearest at a store, but I absolutely believe that it's probably one of those things that you can find a copy of in a lot of different places. I mean, I when I've spoken to people about this interview, the ones that knew about Mommie Dearest, and a lot of them had, well, they know of things like the wire hanger scene or other scenes that tend to have a hold on people's imaginations. But they know about the movie, even though it's 40 years old, and I think it still gets played on a lot of different streaming sites. Maybe if people are still watching cable. I haven't watched cable in long enough to have an answer to that question, but I'm sure it gets played where people see it and have seen it, and you can probably find it in a lot of different places. So we're going to go ahead and take our next break of this episode. When we come back, Ashley will be talking about what he has taken away from the writing of the book and what he hopes readers might take away from reading the book. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with Ashley Hoff about his book, Mommie Dearest, based on the movie With Love, Mommie Dearest, based on the movie Mommie Dearest. And I think I said the name of the book wrong earlier in the episode as well. Movie is Mommie Dearest. Book is With Love, Mommie Dearest. My apologies. But we were talking about the ongoing resonance of the film, the popularity of the film, the fact that a lot of people still know about this film. You can still buy it in various places where you can buy such things, and that says a lot about the success of the film, whether it was a critical success or not. The fact that it's still very, very popular and still very findable says a lot about its success. Let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Ashley.
The main takeaway that I personally got from the writing of this book, and that I hope readers of the book get, is that talking about and researching Mommie Dearest made me reassess my ideas of what makes for failure or what makes for success. There are a lot of movies that were very successful that have sunk into obscurity. Nobody cares 4 years or 4 decades on. Mommie Dearest, which was so critically reviled and has become such a notorious joke in so many ways. We're still talking about it this many years on. I mean, that screams success to me. My goodness, the movie was never a commercial failure. Mm-hmm. It made money from the first weekend. It set box office records in New York during its first month. It was a highly popular movie at the time, and it remains so this many years later.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, a lot of people put the blame on Faye Dunaway's performance, but that's one element of so many other things. I mean, even at that you talk about the budget cuts that happened at the very beginning that made them have to cut out scenes that probably would have explained things that would have made things flow better throughout the movie, made it less campy. And then the fact that they had to cut the budget, and then the budget, it went way over budget. So they should have just kept the scenes. There's so many different layers that it's amazing.
Well, it was very interesting because the first interview that I had was with Tracy Hotchner, the screenwriter of the movie. And she's one of 4 credited screenwriters in the movie, but she's really the primary screenwriter. And my first interview with Tracy was very revealing, because it became apparent to me that the movie actually started off being sabotaged, or let's say there was attempted sabotage, by a particularly high up Paramount executive for various reasons that I explain in the book. And I realized, oh, I thought I was just writing a book about, the making of a classic movie. I didn't realize I was writing a John Grisham styled thriller. And I don't think in the final edit my book turns out that way quite. It's not quite as life and death as a John Grisham novel, but it was another element that just put the movie, it just got off on the wrong foot. And things could have been so different, with so many different elements in place, but that initial wrench thrown into the gearworks really kind of set the ball rolling for the way the movie turned out.
Yeah. Well, and I love the details that you include. I mean, the fact that all the jewelry was real and very early on, they lost a piece of that jewelry. I was like, oh my gosh. I think I would have quit right then and there. Nope. If I lost that, I'm done.
Yeah. That already put the movie $50,000 behind budget on it was either day one or day two, depending on the source. But let's say the movie started off with just that kind of bad omen, and a number of people kind of took it as a bad omen. And the superstitious people who liked to plant stories in the gossip columns, or publicists, whomever, liked to say the ghost of Joan Crawford was at work and, seeking revenge. And they're fun stories. I don't know if they're quite literally true, but let's just say the ghost of Joan Crawford probably got her revenge one way or the other.
People like a good curse story.
Yeah. Well, it's Hollywood. It's all about storytelling.
Exactly. What I didn't realize was that the Razzies came about around this same time. I had no idea the Razzies were that old. So I learned that factoid.
Yeah, the year before Mommie Dearest was released, they'd had the first Razzies. And when John Wilson, who's the co-founder of the Razzies, his now ex-wife had gone to an early studio screening of Mommie Dearest, and her husband was homesick in bed with the flu. But she, as soon as the movie ended, she found a payphone and called him up and said, "John, I've found your next Razzie winner right here." And that's kind of funny. Mommie Dearest was the first movie to sweep the Razzies in 1982. And,
Yeah. And she had to find a payphone to do it. And that's another thing that wouldn't happen now.
Yeah. Makes it a bit of a period piece. I mean, everybody thought Mommie Dearest would be an awards winner. They just didn't specify which awards they were counting on.
There you go. You got to be more specific in your manifestation. So
yeah,
this is the second book that you've written about the entertainment world. What draws you to writing these types of books?
I guess, well, I went to college at Columbia College in Chicago. I was a theater major at that time, and then determined early on, I hate auditions. I hate auditioning. I hate the auditioning process. But while I was at Columbia, I ended up getting an internship with one of the talent agencies in Chicago, and worked there and another agency. Basically, internship turned into paid assistantship, turned into, I was an on-camera agent. So I dealt with, I represented actors for film, commercial, television, and theatrical, or television and industrial work in Chicago, and then moved to Los Angeles, worked on the commercial side of an agency out here. And because I worked in agencies, I mean, I got to know a lot of actors and actresses personally, because agency work sounds so glamorous, but it's really, an unemployment agency or an employment agency. You're getting work for people, and it's all temp work, And I guess because I knew so many actors and actresses, knew so much about the behind the scenes stuff, I just felt like particularly with the Match Game book, in that case, I wanted to shine a spotlight on the people that so many people, television audience members had been watching for years. They've always liked them or disliked them or felt whatever they felt about them, but they've never really known anything about them and never really known anything about the crew members or the production staff members that they never see and who never really get any kind of attention or really, the kudos that they deserve for the work that they put into things. So I guess I wanted to kind of pay tribute to those people, the people that make this stuff work. And I guess because I have always felt that movies and television are basically the modern 20th into 21st century, at least from the American perspective. These are our fairy tales. This is our mythology. This is the stuff that shapes our dreams, but it also shapes our morality. It shapes our creativity. It shapes our ideas. It's just the modern aspect of sitting around the campfire, telling tales and entertaining each other to keep the dinosaurs away or whatever. And I guess since I view Hollywood, movies, television, as being, our modern fairy tales and fables that teach us things, I wanted to, I guess, kind of inject some sense of nobility into these subjects. Game shows are such a throwaway subject. People don't respect game shows. They're not art. And yet there is an art to them. They stimulate a lot of creativity. And interestingly enough, there are a lot of people who, if they, came from another country and moved to the United States, and English was not their first language, a lot of people learned English by watching game shows. I had never really understood that until it was explained to me by somebody. Game shows, because they're about communication, you learn nuance, you learn slang, you learn kind of the subtleties of language through watching game shows that you would not get watching, I don't know, a soap opera or other movies or whatever. So they serve this is the lack of the caffeine hitting me right now.
It's all good.
They serve or can serve an educational purpose as well. And I think as a result of that, even though things like game shows or Mommie Dearest are so often maligned and so easily maligned by people, make it just into a big joke, I wanted to imbue it with the nobility that I felt it deserved. These movies, Mommie Dearest is a camp classic, but it's still a bona fide classic. It's been around 43 years, and I can walk down the street and I can utter the words, "No wire hangers ever." And no matter the age or background of the people, even if they've never seen the movie, people will know what I'm referencing. They'll get it. And I think that's the power of this movie. You can't call it a failure if it is that indelible after 4 decades. That's kind of amazing. It's one thing that I wish Faye Dunaway would be able to admit to herself, is that people are not really making fun of her the way she thinks they are. They're not making fun of her performance as a bad thing. They're kind of invigorated by it. They're energized by it. And do they laugh? Yes, they laugh. But at the same time, they're laughing with her in a way. They're not laughing at her. People don't ridicule Faye Dunaway as Faye Dunaway. They are ridiculing the situation, this power-mad, power struggle situation between a mother and a daughter. They're ridiculing the relationship of a bully to an oppressed victim, or they're, it's not a negative. It's not a negative. And so I think with the book, I just wanted to pay respect to the people that did very legitimate, very hard work and made this movie, for better, for worse, unforgettable.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that behind everything, you know, whether it's successful or not successful, whether we ridicule it, we forget that there are hundreds, often, of people behind it who put a lot of themselves into trying to make it successful.
Yeah. And it helps if they've got a bit of a sense of humor. I mean,
Yeah.
Mara Hobel, who played young Christina, told me, you know, she's gotten all the memes and the jokes and the this every Mother's Day.
Yeah.
She has 2 kids. Every Mother's Day, every birthday, you know, she gets all the things sent to her, and she has a laugh over it because she gets it. She knows.
Yeah.
And although Mommie Dearest is what she is best known for doing, it's not the only thing she's done, so she's okay with that.
Yeah.
And she's very proud of the legacy because she's also recognized the fact that, again, for some people viewing the movie, it is a very cathartic experience. There have been people who approached her, you know, when she was in a drugstore or something, and said, you know, you're the girl that was in that movie. And they had a quiet moment of talking, and you know, people would explain to her what that movie meant to them, what her performance meant to them, what the book meant to them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful. You're a very lucky individual if you are cast in a movie that 43 years on has had that much staying power and affected that many people. Again, sometimes giving them unintentional laughs and sometimes giving them a therapy session.
Well, yeah, and I remember you talk about that scene in the book that she ended up crying in the aisle of a drugstore with a complete stranger who just approached her, but talked about their experience with that movie, and the fact that she can see past kind of some of the camp elements or the things that people get frustrated with and realize that it does have an impact, a human impact. I think she does a really good job. Mara does a really good job of connecting with people even beyond the memes.
Yeah.
So you were a theater major,
Yes.
kind of came at the writing thing because, you know, somebody else said, I'll talk to you and you write the book.
Basically, I guess the bottom line is I'm writing the books that I myself want to read.
Yes.
And it actually was very surprising to me that nobody had written a book about Mommie Dearest previously, because it just seems like a no-brainer that somebody would have. And I'm pretty sure anybody else who would have written a book that would have just made fun of the whole thing, which might be one book idea, but that was not the book idea I chose to put my name on. Because again, I just felt that I wanted to take it from a sympathetic direction. I met Christina Crawford years ago at a screening of Mommie Dearest. She was selling at that time copies of the 20th anniversary version of her book, Mommie Dearest, in the lobby. She got a lot of flack for that because people were saying, well, you know, you're making money off this movie and your movie trashes your mother and all this stuff. But the thing is, she said, she and I had a private conversation at that time. And basically, you know, I felt creepy that here we are sitting here watching this movie about her life, ostensibly about her life. And she's sitting out in the movie lobby all alone. So I went out and talked with her. But she talked about at that time the fact that even though she really does not like the movie, there are a lot of inaccuracies in the movie. And she's been blamed for those inaccuracies, which she had nothing to do with. She was, in fact, shut out of the production altogether, which I also talk about in the book. But she recognized the fact that the popularity of the movie, the enduring popularity of the movie version of Mommie Dearest, coupled with the continual reissuance of her memoir, the actual book version of Mommie Dearest, basically have helped bring into the mainstream this topic of child abuse, how to prevent it, how to overcome it if you yourself have experienced it. There are laws that have since been put into effect, providing better child welfare that were not in place in 1977 and 1978.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of positive stuff that has come out of this movie and its popularity. So she recognizes it, even though she does not really like the movie. She felt, rightly so, that it trivialized what she felt was a very serious topic, and of course her own life, and her mother's career. And that's unfortunate, but at the same time, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You're just going to continue talking about child abuse and what people can do to, prevent it. If there are people who have anger issues, we have these anger management classes, and we have therapists who are working overdrive, because people are more conscious these days about how daily stresses cause people to behave not always in the most admirable ways behind closed doors or in off moments sometimes with family members. And in that sense, we're better off than we were in 1978.
As I was reading this book and as I was speaking with Ashley, I kept thinking that I can't quite imagine being in Christina's position and writing this deeply personal memoir that was first received by many people who didn't believe her or thought she was exaggerating her experiences or what have you, and then having that memoir turned into a movie that is panned by so many people, that was not the experience that she was hoping it would be, that people laughed at scenes that were not meant to be funny, etc. I can't quite imagine, but I know from what I read in the book and again from what Ashley had said, that she has taken the success of the movie and been able to utilize that continued interest in the movie to continue working on making the issues better known and making sure that the things that happen in her childhood don't happen to other children, working in her small way to ensure that systems are put into place or that people are aware, etc. So something good comes out of most situations, and I can't imagine her initial reaction, but the fact that she's really been able to utilize the success of the movie to help with the understanding of child abuse, I think is a positive. So we're going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, more with Ashley. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with Ashley Hoff. Before the break, Ashley was talking about Christina's experience with the movie and her memoir, and how she's been able to utilize the success of the movie to talk about her experiences and to really highlight that at the time there weren't a lot of distinctions between discipline and what we would now consider to be abuse. And so being able to highlight those experiences and have things change for the better is a positive that came out of this memoir, this movie, etc. So let's return now to the conversation with Ashley. Well, and just the number of people that you talk about throughout the book as you're chronicling as much as you can about the writing of the memoir, at least, and the number of people that knew or suspected, but a lot of them seemed to know that things were not great in the Crawford household, that, you know, Joan Crawford was probably an alcoholic and not always the kindest of mothers, and for whatever reason ignored it. I think that
Well, I think a lot of times, and especially at that time, again, there was no real distinction made between disciplining your child and abusing them.
yes.
There are a lot of people who feel that Christina exaggerated her memories. I cannot speak to the veracity of her experiences, but I do quote a lot of Joan Crawford's contemporaries, people who knew her, worked with her, and so on, and knew and worked with the kids, who say they definitely witnessed, let's say, a tenuous relationship between parent and child. And, you know, the simple fact is, whatever you think of Christina Crawford personally or her initial book, the fact is a lot of good has come from it, as well as the subsequent movie version.
Yeah.
I'm pleased that at least people are aware of it.
Yeah.
You know, that's you know, cheers to problem solving, I guess.
Yeah. And sometimes that's all you can do is take the situation you're given and see what you can make out of it.
Yeah.
So.
And as for the movie itself, you know, it's obviously had legs. I mean, it's continued this long. It's, I'm sure, going to still remain a popular movie for many years to come, and hopefully provide some entertainment, as well as, you know, some perhaps nobler counseling along the way. And you know, I hope people enjoy the book that I wrote, and I hope people who are curious to know more about the real Joan Crawford will seek out her movies. The people who want to know more about the real Christina Crawford, she has written a number of books, the first of which was Mommie Dearest, but she's written several others. Check them out. Go to your local libraries, patronize your local libraries. You know, make good use of this stuff.
Yeah.
And enjoy it. Learn from it.
Right. Exactly. Are you working on a new book at the moment, or do you have an idea for where are you in that process?
I'm working on two books, dealing with cult classic movies that I can't really announce yet, but they also take, I guess, a serious look at various issues that are found within the respective stories, and talk about both the elements of, you know, what made the movie so popular, its flaws, as well as its, you know, positive things, as well as, you know, what is the subject matter and how can we find some depth in it. And I don't know, pop culture, pop psychology, I don't know, if it makes for a fun read and maybe somebody learns something.
But it is fascinating to look at those movies that become cult classics and why, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think, well, it's interesting when movies become very popular because they've reached that number of people who agree that there's some merit to this thing. You know, you can't really argue with it. You can say there are flaws, this is wrong with it, that's wrong with it. But at the same time, obviously, there's something about it that is still scratching at public consciousness.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the process of writing. I guess it's whatever element of the brain, part of the brain, is into puzzles and games. I enjoy the researching. I enjoy the tracking people down and interviewing them, and finding out their thoughts, their opinions on things, as well as preserving their memories and shaping it into a story that is hopefully both readable, but also, again, educational on some level. And I guess that's my main goal. I just want to continue writing, and I enjoy this. I enjoy the people that I've met. I've met a lot of great people through the writing of these books.
Yeah. Good. If people want to know more about you and the books, website, if you have one, and any social media that you're active on.
Yes, I have a website that's currently under construction. However, I am on both Instagram as AA Hoff, the word double, DOUBLE, single letter A, Hoff, because A, Ashley Hoff, looks really odd when you just cram all the
A's together,
lettering and words. Exactly. I'm on Facebook personally, just simply Ashley Hoff, because I think for some reason, Facebook would not accept the initial A and my name. I guess they thought I was a drag queen or something. And so I am on that. And the book, With Love, Mommie Dearest, also has its own Facebook page. It is a place where you can find all my book publicity events, that sort of thing. As I said, I'm at LAX, heading off to O'Hare to Chicago, doing events at the Literati bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm doing some events at Columbia College in Chicago, my alma mater. I'll be doing other events in Peoria, Illinois, and Madison, Wisconsin. And then also on top of that, I guess, anybody who wants to find the book itself, With Love, Mommie Dearest, The Making of an Unintentional Camp Classic, with an introduction by Bruce Valanche. The book is by A. Ashley Hoff. That's me. Please support, whenever you can, indie bookstores, mom and pop run bookstores. I do not negate the chain bookstores because they sell books too. I'm all for that. And, the usual online retail outlets. I don't negate anybody. I mean, if they're selling books and you're buying books, I'm all for it. If you cannot afford books, go to your local public library. They carry books. If they do not carry my book and you want to read it, or any of my books, or any other books that you want to read, suggest to the librarians. There's usually some sort of suggestion box or some way to suggest they start carrying particular books. Not just mine, others that you want to read. But please, feel free to seek out mine. I just want to make sure that we keep America literate and keep readers stimulated, keep ideas flowing. I think that's for everybody's betterment. I think it's more interesting that way. And again, if you can't afford to shop at bookstores or, indie bookstores versus chain bookstores or whatever, check out your libraries, check out your schools and school libraries. We support all of the above.
Absolutely. Well, I know you're at the airport, you're about to catch a flight. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day, especially since you are busy. I really appreciate it, Ashley. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do to shine a spotlight on authors and their books. It's appreciated.
Thank you once again to Ashley for joining me to talk about this book. My apologies once again for my camera going all wiggy there at the end. I do think I have that issue fixed. So fingers crossed going forward that we're not going to have any more weird camera glitches. But thank you to Ashley for joining me to talk about With Love, Mommie Dearest. If you are a fan of the movie, maybe you've read the memoir, I think you should definitely read this book. Even if you haven't read the memoir or seen the movie, this is a really good look at the making of a movie, what goes into the making of a movie, what went on behind the scenes, and how this movie became the, again, unintentional camp classic that it became. Maybe you want to make a trilogy of it. Read the memoir, then watch the movie, then read this book. That could be a very interesting exercise. But if you're interested in entertainment or Hollywood or any of the behind the scenes stuff, then I have not read the memoir. I think it should be on my list, but I found this just a fascinating look into the making of this movie, and Ashley does a really good job of putting together all the pieces and trying to give a very balanced overview of everybody's role and how things happened and what fit together to create this critically panned but you can't unquestionably successful film that people are still talking about over 40 years later. So definitely check this book out if you're interested, or you can also check out his first book. Maybe if you're more interested in the game shows, I think that would also be really interesting. There were some really interesting conversations on game shows in the 70s. You'll see clips sometimes and think, wow, that was not what I was expecting. So you might want to check that one out as well. I hope that you will join me for the next episode. That episode's going to be on Friday this week. I had 2 interviews over the weekend, so we'll have 2 episodes this week. I will be speaking with author Joan Crawford about her book. It's a collection of short stories. It is called Displaced Persons. The first half of the book and those short stories take place in Israel, and the second half of the book and those short stories take place in the U.S. It is a book about finding yourself in the place that you are. It's about relationships. It's about being displaced in a lot of different ways. So we encounter a lot of people and their stories, and in 2 very different places, but again with people who are encountering similar issues of finding themselves wherever they are. So please join me for that conversation with Joan on that next episode. I hope that your week is going well. We are in the middle of the week. I'm working my way through this week, so thank you for bearing with me, but I hope your week is going well. I hope that whatever your week is throwing at you, though, you do have plenty of time. As always, as I always say, books can help you in a variety of situations, whether you're happy, sad, joyful, confused, whatever life throws at you, there's books that can help you. So I really hope that no matter what else is going on, this week is giving you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. That's my closing tagline, but I forgot to ask you to please like, follow, subscribe, leave a positive review. It all helps the algorithm. If you're not doing so already, follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. Again, thank you for bearing with my discombobulation. Again, hope that the week is giving you lots and lots of time to get yourself lost in a good book, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to